Here's how you make some delicious cinnamon swirl bread, even if you've never made bread before. We need 2/3 cup milk plus 2 tablespoons of butter. If you're using dry active yeast, that means it needs to wake up. So my recommendation is you heat up your milk to warm, around 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Add 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of yeast. Give it a little mix and let it sit for about 5 minutes. If you're using instant yeast, skip this wait and dump everything into your bowl. Like this lovely sample. Today we need 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. If it's your first time making this recipe, start with 2 cups of flour because it's always easier to add more flour than to try to compensate for too much. Teaspoon salt. Dump your yeast mixture in. I'm using instant yeast today, so I don't need to look for the normal markers that it's alive. But if you're using active dry yeast and want to double check that your yeast is alive and kicking, your checklist is number 1, is there a lot of foam? Because the yeast will be nom-nomming on that sugar in there. If not, does it smell like a dive bar? If one of those 2 things is true, dump everything in. Otherwise, yeast is alive. So last but not least, an egg. Within the spatula, give it 20 big stirs. Now we're gonna switch to some spatulettes to try to get a little bit more incorporation. A spatulette is a term I have made up, so can't go Googling. But what we're gonna do is you're gonna take your spatula, scrape the side of the bowl, flip it, punch it. Do that 20 times. She's sticky, but she holds her shape, and we don't have any extra dry bits anywhere. Great. If you're using a mixer today, put everything into your mixing bowl, start on the lowest level, and let it come together for 1 minute. Here the dough has come together, so now we're gonna set a timer for 5 minutes. Get yourself a surface you make unclean with a bit of kitchen lube. Now we're gonna knead for approximately 5 to 8 minutes, but I'll tell you how many kneads that is. Kneading, V-easy, palms out, lean forward with your body weight, pull it back, turn it a quarter, that is 1. This is after 1 minute or roughly 25 kneads. Because it has butter in it, it's a little bit more forgiving with sticking on a surface, but it's still a little bit too sticky. So if you need to, add a sprinkle of flour, max 1 tablespoon at a time, 2 minutes or 50 kneads, 3 minutes or 75 kneads, 4 minutes or 100 kneads. Here we are at 5 minutes or 125 kneads. This one's the one I kneaded by hand. This one's the one that I've been making in the mixer. Pretty similar. Thank you for your services. Go back to the mixer. Here they are after 7 minutes or 175 kneads each. How do I know if she's ready to go rest? Because she's seen some stuff. Well, she's smooth, she's not bumpy, she's stretchy. We love her. We're gonna plop her into a slightly oiled dish. I'm just gonna use the one that I already, don't look. We're gonna cover her. Either version, whether using the mixer or by hand, we're gonna let it rest for 1 hour until they double in size. She's looking gorge. Here's our mixer friend, also looking great. We need 10 ounces of walnuts, 4 tablespoons sugar. Paul's recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of cocoa. Instead, I'm gonna use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Why? Because basically when I did some Googling, that was another version I saw, and I like cinnamon. We're gonna pre-grind this for about 30 seconds because we want this as small as possible. So we're just giving it a head start before we add the remaining ingredients for the filling. Melt half a stick of butter or 4 tablespoons, which are typically listed on the side of the block. We give our thanks to modern science and pour in the melted butter. Add 4 tablespoons of milk, 1 egg, and half a teaspoon vanilla. Give it another zoomy. This is after about a minute. We want it nice and fine because that will be the texture that our little teethies experience when it's mixed in with the bread. We got our clean surface, a small sprinkle of flour, gently coax her out of her home. We're about to roll this out, so ideally you have a roller, but if you don't, a wine bottle works well too. Just do not put all of your weight on top of this bottle. Give it more of a love push. This is on top, this is a love push. We're going to make this into a rectangle. That way when we roll it up, it is a consistent spiral. The easiest way often to get to a rectangle is to go a few long like this, and then turn and adjust on the width in smaller rolls. Ta-da! Alternatively, if you need to, you can definitely move the dough into the shape you want by simply pulling with your hands or guiding with the side. Traditionally, this dough gets rolled out to 2 to 3 times this size, but I don't have the nerves to do that today. If you've got the rectangle, you've succeeded. Take a little bit of butter and brush it onto the dough. Make Bob Ross proud. Just like with cinnamon rolls, thinner dough means more spirals and thicker dough means fewer spirals. but it doesn't affect the flavor. It's still gonna be delicious. I'm just using a spoon to go back and forth and gently massage it into a layer. Placing the dough once it's rolled up into a loaf pan. So I'm gonna grease mine. Tuck your fingers underneath the side here and gently start rolling as tight as possible. Now take the dough on both ends and just give it a little stretch. One of the contributing factors to making this a classic shape is we're going to kind of make an S shape with the dough. Bottom tail in, double back on it, and then kind of like a snake, wrap it towards the top. Recipe calls to make sure that they don't dry out. What I'm gonna do is give them the teeniest spritz and plop them into the oven, which is off. That way I'll reduce the amount of air that goes over them and they won't dry out. Turn your oven on to 350. Now you're gonna take an egg, crack it into a dish, and scramble it with a tablespoon of water. Paint this over the top, which will give it a really beautiful brown sheen. 15 minutes in, I'm gonna turn down the temperature to 300 and let it go for another 45 minutes. Let it rest 30 minutes. You can serve them like this, or if you want, you can make yourself some icing. I'm doing a very simple one with powdered sugar and water and drizzle it over the top.